Everything you think you know about how narcissists are made is wrong. For the last 40 years, the psychological establishment had a simple explanation: narcissists create narcissists. The theory was straightforward: kids watch their parents' grandiose behavior, mirror it, get rewarded for it, and boom, another narcissist is born. It made intuitive sense. Parenting shapes everything, right? Wrong. Researchers at Social Psychological and Personality Science decided to test this assumption by studying thousands of identical and fraternal twin pairs alongside their parents. What they found was stunning. The entire parenting creates narcissism model collapsed. Genetic factors accounted for nearly everything, while parenting style contributed almost nothing. Decades of blame, completely misplaced. Here's what makes this research impossible to ignore. Scientists took thousands of identical twins and fraternal twins, then measured narcissistic traits in both the children and their parents. The logic is simple: identical twins share 100% of DNA, fraternal twins share 50%. If parenting was the culprit, you'd expect identical twins raised by the same narcissistic parent to look similar regardless of genetics. But that's not what happened. Identical twins showed dramatically higher correlation in narcissistic traits than fraternal twins, even when accounting for parenting quality. The numbers were stark. Genetic factors explained roughly 77% of narcissistic trait transmission across generations. Parenting style? Nearly zero predictive value. A kid with a narcissistic parent but different genes showed no elevated narcissism. Meanwhile, a kid with narcissistic genes raised by the most attentive, humble parents still developed narcissistic tendencies. The study controlled for everything: family income, trauma history, sibling dynamics. None of it mattered compared to the genetic load you inherited. This wasn't a small finding buried in methodology. This was the primary conclusion from a major longitudinal study that fundamentally contradicted decades of therapeutic assumption. Your parents didn't install narcissism into you like a software update. You were born with the hardware already loaded. So if your parents didn't hardwire you into narcissism, where does the variation actually come from? The answer is almost entirely outside the home. Your peer groups matter significantly. If you're surrounded by people who validate your ego constantly, who treat you as exceptional, who never challenge you, that environment amplifies whatever narcissistic baseline you inherited genetically. You start believing the feedback loop. Consider someone who grows up as the star athlete in a small town. Coaches praise him relentlessly, girls pursue him, local media covers his games. That social environment isn't creating narcissism from nothing, but it's absolutely amplifying latent traits that might have stayed dormant in a different context. Your achievements and failures shape this too. Early wins without struggle can inflate narcissistic tendencies. Early humiliations can temper them. Then there's the adult choices you make, the people you surround yourself with, the communities you join, whether you seek genuine feedback or only yes men. A genetically predisposed person who deliberately chooses accountability partners, who actively seeks criticism, who builds relationships with people who won't tolerate bullshit, that person develops differently than someone who curates an echo chamber. Your narcissism isn't your parents' creation. It's your environment's sculpture of your genetic clay, and you're holding the chisel. Here's what shifts the moment you accept this research. For decades, people blamed their parents. They'd spend years in therapy unpacking childhood wounds, believing that excessive praise or neglect hardwired them into narcissism. That narrative is seductive because it offers an escape route. It wasn't your fault, it was theirs. But the science says otherwise. Once you know narcissism is primarily genetic, the blame game collapses. You can't point to your mother's validation or your father's indifference anymore. The responsibility moves entirely to you. If you have narcissistic traits, they're not a scar from your upbringing, they're part of your blueprint. That means two things. First, you can't use your parents as an excuse. Second, you actually have power. You're not trying to undo damage from childhood, you're managing a predisposition. That's fundamentally different. A genetic trait doesn't control you unless you let it. You can recognize the impulse to seek admiration, to dominate conversations, to lack empathy in moments where it matters, and choose differently. The shift from victim of parenting to owner of your traits is where real change begins. So you've learned narcissism isn't your parents' fault, it's written in your DNA. But here's what actually matters. Knowing you carry these traits changes nothing unless you act on it. The real power lies in recognizing narcissistic impulses the moment they arise and consciously choosing a different path. Your genes loaded the gun, but you pull the trigger. Self-awareness without action is just expensive therapy talk. Master your traits or be mastered by them.